could be a nice way for us to start off this conversation, because you spoke earlier about inclusion and that's a major initiative for Celsius. And certainly with Binance, you guys have millions of customers around the world who are included in the fintech revolution. So why don't we start with Liz? Can you just give us some view on this view of inclusion related to Celsius?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, so by the way, in fact, Celsius is working with SDG Impact Fund to be able to take, where they can actually take crypto assets in a nonprofit way to help with the SDG initiatives of the UN. I won't bore you with details on that yet, but one of the interesting things is blockchain is extremely important for not-for-profit. I will go off on a slight tangent. My first career was in nonprofit. And right now, globally, there's a huge problem that actually only 10% of intended dollars, or finance gets to the end user, the recipient of this charitable donation. So blockchain is going to eliminate some of the fraud that we find in nonprofit right now. This is all even with best intentions, in fact. I'm not saying that every nonprofit is raking in the commissions, but what's happening is that especially in areas of conflict, bribery gets in the way. So that's not what Celsius does. I just wanted to throw that out there. So what we want to do is obviously lower any hurdle for people to have meaningful financial impact. We talk about the unbanked, but let's also talk about the banked who are receiving nothing from those banks. So there's those two populations. There's the population of the world that actually does finance on their phone right now with phone minutes, for example. There's also the population that is getting services from their banks, but those banks are charging them extraordinary fees. Usurious in some cases, and in some cases just unconscionable. So one of the things that touched a nerve with our app is that people are taking their money out of banks, buying stable coins, as we talked about, putting them into our wallet and earning interest every week. The way it used to happen in the US 30 years ago, but they bought up all the community banks. Community banking, in fact, has an impact model because it actually builds resources within the community that it was supposed to serve. They don't exist anymore.
And local circulation of money is extremely important for wealth creation.
Right, support of local businesses, particularly small businesses, where a lot of wealth is generated. And now we see, and then there's countries like India, where there's a rising middle class, right? There is an extraordinary technology boom in India, there's a rising middle class. How are they gonna store value? In the Arab and India, in the Indian subcontinent, in the Arab countries, it traditionally was gold. Young people anecdotally are no longer buying gold, physical gold. Maybe they'll buy digital representations of gold, but how do they monetize all of this?
They're buying Bitcoin.
They're buying Bitcoin instead of gold right now, for sure. We can help them monetize those digital assets, whether it's digital gold, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's stablecoins, et cetera, if the regulatory environment is there for us to do so.
Okay, thank you. Jin, same question to you about what is Binance doing around inclusion as you guys scale? And for those of the audience who don't know a lot about Binance, maybe you could just give us a quick overview of the juggernaut.
Sure. Wow, where to start? So Binance is largely recognized as the largest crypto-to-crypto exchange in the world. Surprisingly, we're just over 2 years old. We celebrate our 2-year birthday in July. But I think there was a third-party claim out there that we may have been the fastest profitable unicorn ever. So reached about $1 billion valuation within 5 or 6 months. Became the largest exchange by daily transaction volume within 4 months. A lot of that was a bit of luck, a bit of timing, a bit of skill, hopefully. We, in the early days, did an ICO, raised $15 million, and by the time Sequoia was ready to write us a check, we were profitable. Actually, I had to go to court with them.
Did you take the Sequoia check?
Did not take the money. They sued us for that,
Yes.
And they paid $7 million in legal fees. Which I can say publicly because we countersued, so that we could say that publicly. That's the history, so it's a pretty extraordinary story. But ultimately, back to your original question, it's great because a lot of our foundational principles are around inclusion versus, for example, some of the things that we've announced in the last quarter. But early on, we formed Binance Charity Foundation, which was meant to serve what we call the bottom billion. And we had some active projects in Africa, but to Liz's point, we saw the exact same problem where the dollar donated was getting what we thought was actually 50 cents. So you're actually seeing worse numbers than us, but we think we can get that up to 90+% on the dollar by making everything transparent on the blockchain. And then we actually went so far as to send people to, for example, Lunch for School Children was one of our first programs. We sent people to Uganda, set them up with accounts that we could actually see, donators could actually see the specific lunch that recipients and the specific recipient that was eating that lunch. So just trying to show that as a use case has been something that we've continued doing. We did something around women's health as well with distributing feminine sanitary products through our pink token. So that's one part of it. I think the other part that is an immediate use case is the global remittance market. So if you look at the fees required, and some of the largest remittance corridors are, for example, Hong Kong to Philippines, US to Mexico, right now, Venezuela out. And so the fees and time required to get some of these funds out are pretty extraordinarily high. There's been demonstrations that through the blockchain, you can transfer $1 billion with $75 in network fees. So that, to me, is a much more efficient solution.
Yeah, I mean, there was just that single Bitcoin transaction for $1 billion of Bitcoin recently that got a lot of attention. For both of you, so I think of this discussion a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So we're starting off with this basic part of the pyramid, which is inclusion. Like, how do we get everybody in and involved, not just with sort of digital assets or crypto per se, but with financial inclusion, which is like a massive determinant of essentially societal progress. But if you go the next layer up, we could start to look at wealth creation. And both of you, you could argue, arguably, are in the wealth creation business for your customers. So in slightly different ways, you guys are paying interest on your clients' funds, and you guys are providing maybe more, B2B, the ability for lots of different tokens to list. There are more tokens on Binance than there are probably stars in the sky. But going back to Binance for a second, I think the ICO market, like 2 years ago, was the hot thing. And now, if you're kind of an insider, it's really moved to like this kind of exchange listing market. So instead of you just going out and doing an ICO on your own, the exchanges are now taking a major role in coin listings and really being a determinant of what's successful. So you can talk to me a little bit about the exchange listing market and how that's evolving, and then we'll come over to you and talk a little bit more about how you make all your customers earn some cash.
Yeah, sure. I do think that in the current market environment, capital raising is still probably the current killer app. We do see some applications within digital gaming, but I think the panel earlier on entertainment is a great example of that. That project financing is a perfect application for the ICO and now the IEO market. And I think the IEO market right now is an evolution of the ICO market. So I'm a former investment banker, and the way I would make the analogy is an ICO is essentially like a Series A, B, C, and an IEO is a bit like an IPO. So there still are ICOs that are happening privately. So what was happening in 2017 was it was sort of a direct to public, and I was an internet investment banker, so I saw this 20 years ago where if you had anything.com at the end of your name, you could immediately go public based on air. And I think that was a little bit of what 2017 looked like. And so now it's a healthier market where you have projects doing private ICOs to investors that have done a little more homework, and then investors or traders are looking to brands like Binance to be a gatekeeper for what projects have made progress, have stable project teams, have an actual plan in place, and have some traction in place. So I think it is a healthy evolution, but it needs to continue in that direction. I don't think we're at the final stop. Far from it.
Okay. And then over to Liz on
I'll mention that in a second. I do want to pick up on what he has said, and what I believe is that we need an effective framework for retail or non-accredited investors to have access to these. I mean, IPOs, who had access to IPOs? Let's be serious. It's the same VCs that have access to everything else. Mm-hmm. And then bankers. That's it. I mean, we really have, I mean, this is a little philosophical. What is an accredited investor? Exactly. it's traditionally been primarily male, primarily in the club for many years, people who inherit wealth, people who grow up. How do we have upward mobility in investing? Crypto has given us this, actually.
Yeah. And especially when you have a declining middle class because they don't own access to assets.
Correct.
Right? So being excluded from owning assets is the fastest way to stay stuck in your economic class.
That's right. And by the way, everybody who owns a home does not own their home. I mean, let's be serious. The banks own them.
Yeah.
So even the asset that actually is the most useful to them as they grow the wealth, at least in the US, I'm talking specifically about the US, they don't even own that. So in the end of the day, they don't have access to these marketplaces. They don't actually own the real estate that they're living in. What do they own? So ownership and access is really critical to us. So I think that as we move towards this interesting framework for public crowdfunding, I think we cannot backburner this. We cannot get too scared of this. And I encourage regulators in every environment to create effective mechanisms for crowdfunding. It's critical. To do.
Well, we've done that with the ICO legislation here. Like, there's a clear framework for ICOs.
Agreed.
So, I think this is one of the few places in the world that has taken that and created clear legal structures for doing that. I mean, it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. It's not just the Wild West, but you can do it. So.
No, and I think we have as an industry, we have a lot of education to do globally.
Yeah. So tweet Bermuda.
Now back to Celsius, what we've done. So the niche that we have, and this is really, it's actually not entirely new. We just tried to reinvent it for retail. We're essentially what we would consider giving what are traditional hedge fund returns to crypto holders. Rather than keeping something on a ledger in their drawer, which, by the way, it's a great product, but it's in your drawer, you can monetize that asset now. By giving it, by depositing it into Celsius, we earn fees on it, and we're giving 80% of the fees we earn by lending that asset back to the consumer. We're also building transparency. We will be the first financial institution on the globe, I believe, to be fully transparent when we're done. And so they can audit us in real time. In fact, you can do parts of this now, and we have we have an awesome community, and they've built some of these tools for us and with us, truthfully. So what we're doing now, if you deposit Bitcoin into our wallet, you'll earn every day and get your interest distributed every Monday. And our rates fluctuate based on what we earn. And if you're earning, some people benchmark by us. Not giving advice to do that, but if we see that we're giving out, 8% 1 week, it means we earn 10% the week prior. We also we did an ICO. We have a token that we're using as an incentive program within our app, so people can earn even more, depending on your jurisdiction. So I think that this is on, now we have 20 assets? The other use case, of course, I'll keep mentioning is stablecoin, because right now in today's environment, that's the easiest transition to earning interest, because it is, with a company that they can trust that the dollars are in the bank.
Are you paying interest on stablecoins?
High interests.
So how much?
It's been varying between 7 and 12% over the last several weeks.
So a digital dollar at 7% if you hold it with Celsius versus 0% if you hold it with the bank.
Banks are proud of their 1.5.
Yeah. Okay.
By the way, and let's talk about, we haven't really gone after the banks yet, so I'm going to.
This is why I only wanted 2 people on this discussion, because it's going to get good, guys.
They're going, everyone says, well, they're going to have to adapt or die. We're not big enough yet for that. However, when you tell people how much banks are making on your money, they're taking Stan's money and lending it to Jin and making 23% and giving all of that to their shareholders and investors. Whereas that, you are floating their credit line and you're earning nothing from it. Nothing. I mean, this is unconscionable in every way. So I hope that our ecosystem grows big enough to really tip the scales in our favor, because they will have to adapt or change.
And so in defense of the banks, I think the banks would say, yeah, but we do that because it costs so much to regulate. So if you talk to HSBC, they'll tell you it costs $200 a year just to manage the compliance for a single customer.
They also publish their financial statements.
Yeah, no, and they're making billions, right?
You can see what they're earning.
There are, and I guess the point I'm getting to is that as regulation and other things become part of this industry, some of those efficiencies that we currently enjoy might be somewhat eroded, because the banks are, of course the banks are killing us all. But they're definitely spending a lot of money on infrastructure that is imposed upon them by the financial system.
Oh, I would argue that they're imposing their will upon the regulators as well. So I think it's definitely a two-way street.
Okay, I'll buy that.
I think the regulations serve them.
Let's talk about China. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have a China strategy, but I'd like to know what it is if you do. And Jin, like obviously you live in Shanghai, you spend a lot of time around the world, but and Binance started in China. So it's great to have what I will assume is a China expert here. I have about 1 million questions. So I mean, one is just we've heard from various sources that China is preparing an announcement for a national digital currency, but there are definitely, let's just say, many ramifications to that. So the official announcement may not come for a while. Just curious, what's the view from China? And particularly, is there any potential for, say, China x Bermuda bilateral growth in this industry?
Okay, I'll start with the first question while I think about the answer to the second. So China's interesting. We stay relatively low key with our presence in China. We don't actively market due to laws against crypto trading, although it's very well known that there's an active market there, largely C2C. But to answer your question on the PBOC announcements, this is something they've been working on for quite some time. So China clearly had plans to put the RMB on the blockchain. I think what probably triggered an announcement this year, we can actually thank Facebook for that. So with their announcement of Libra, this was largely direct. They had already been working on it, so I think they found that this was the right time to directly respond to that. From Binance's standpoint and as a strategist, it was great to just sort of sit back and see this play out, because ultimately you're going to get sort of sovereign level FOMO, right? So you have Facebook announcing this, China responding, and likely US then saying, well, we don't want RMB-backed stablecoins all over the place threatening us as reserve currency. And so this may perhaps accelerate their acceptance of something similar, if not Libra. From what I understand, they do have still a number of challenges ahead of them, but wish them the best of luck. They're fighting a battle that the crypto community right now don't have the resources to do. Keep in mind that the entire market cap of crypto is only 200 and, I think as of today, 30 billion, which is a fraction of Facebook's market cap. So, or maybe half. So yeah, they've done us, I think, a favor, and the PBOC right now is actively encouraging offshore RMB-backed stablecoins, and so we announced Venus earlier this year to see if there are any takers in that space. We're offering our blockchain, our own Binance blockchain, our liquidity, as well as our expertise in structuring token economics for those that want to put a sovereign or any other currency, stable currency on the blockchain. Yep.
I want to come to your China strategy, but just real quick, pick out a couple points. I'd love to pivot back to your views on Libra generally, because we haven't talked about Libra enough today and the ramifications. But just real quick on Binance Chain and Binance Coin. The coin has done very, very well for anybody who bought it when it first came out. They're probably not here today because they're on a yacht. But for Binance Chain, can you just give us like 2 sentences on what makes it different and worth looking at?
Sure. Just very quickly, the intention to develop Binance Chain was really to accelerate adoption for payments. So Bitcoin is not a practical currency for transactions. It's great for, I think, storing value and perhaps transferring value if it's not time sensitive. But and then Ethereum as well. I think they have it down to minutes. But the goal of Binance Chain is to have 1 second transaction times. So that it can compete with a credit card swipe, or in China's essentially a cashless society for those of you who haven't been there. And so competing with the user experience of WeChat or Alipay is something that we wanted to develop. And so that's the primary advantage. So it doesn't have the smart contracts, but if you're going to put a currency meant for transactions and payments, it's a pretty ideal platform.
Very interesting. Liz, can we get a little insight into your China strategy?
Look, we have it's a unique place, and it's a place that we operate with great care. But we're in 156 countries around the world, so each one of those we have jurisdictional concerns. We look for partners on the ground in all these places, but we want to offer our services in every place that we can.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty simple and good strategy. Let's go have a little look at Libra and say even WeChat. So my personal view on Libra is that in many ways it's actually not about crypto at all, but it's actually about a global response to WeChat's impending takeover of the global payment system. Because if you look at payments inside China today, if I'm not wrong, 49% of retail payments in China are done over WeChat. And that is expanding quickly into Africa. It's looking into other Asian countries. And on, let's just say, a 5-year timeline, we could expect that WeChat payments could become seriously a very big global payment network. I think that Libra is a response to that more than anything else. Agree, disagree? And what's your view on Libra's odds of success? And we can make this Chatham House rules.
The reason why I'm pausing here is I have some restrictions on what I can say on this. Well, do I think it's a direct response to WeChat? I don't think it was born out of that, but I think it perhaps moved forward within the Facebook organization with that consideration in mind. I think if I'm an internal strategist at Facebook, I see how large my community is, and it's larger than any country in the world. I see the number of advertisers I have, and so I see an opportunity to create my own currency. Just like the airlines create frequent flyer miles and hotels create their loyalty programs. So I see this as a way to increase the switching costs of advertising from one platform to another, certainly. But I also do think that there's and I think you have to understand a little bit organizationally that the Libra piece of Facebook is carved out now of Facebook. And having spoken to some of the leadership there, they are very much in the ethos of cryptocurrency. So they do have good intentions. The way Libra is initially structured is to be a permission-closed network. So that is not what you would want long-term, but they have made public statements that it would become a permissionless system, and so that's why they have the Libra Association, and hopefully they will be able to continue on that path. As far as, you asked what the odds are of their success. I think it really is, pending Washington, D.C. If it gets launched, I think it's pretty clear that they'd be instantly one of the largest currencies in circulation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just from day one. And I could agree with that strategy. Hub Culture, which is a social network, we launched a currency 13 years ago because we saw the inherent benefits of having a currency inside the network. And our authority groupings and even the structure of N is very similar to what's been announced with Libra. So I can definitely see the logic there. But obviously the scale of something like us and the scale of something like Facebook is radically different. And we are, I think, talking about East, West, essentially global payment systems to give people a choice around digital payments in particular. How do you see it?
I mean, it started out as a $10 million pay-to-play. It's quite
but nobody
centralized.
paid. Yeah.
Right. Look, it's probably good for crypto, although I don't think it is a crypto. Facebook has a payment system in their messaging system now. Does anybody in this room use it? Yeah, exactly. So I don't actually know anyone else who does. They're missing this piece. I do. Will it succeed? It's a really big gamble now, considering the political environment in Washington. I don't know the answer to that, but they're certainly putting enough weight behind it that it's going to be interesting to play out. I think because it brought the crypto discussion to the fore. They say, any publicity is good publicity sometimes. Facebook itself is going through its own tumultuous public publicity right now, right? So we don't know actually how individuals feel about a currency managed by Facebook as separate as they say it is. I'm gonna give a wait and see on this because I don't know how this will play out. They have the weight to make it happen in the end of the day.
I'm going to ask you guys a controversial question. If Facebook asked you to join Libra, do you think, and I know you can't speak exactly on behalf of your orgs, but do you think that Binance or Celsius you could ever envision joining a network like Libra?
Well, Alex
I'm
has
not here
said
to
very
ask the
publicly,
easy
no way.
questions.
We have to do whatever serves our customers best. And we would evaluate every opportunity as it came across our desk. And the truth is, the bigger we get, the more opportunities we do have, which is exciting to us. If it doesn't directly benefit my user, the answer is no, unqualified.
I like that answer. No. I'll just say that we would consider it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the odds are that Libra will evolve into a system that will hold more than a Libra coin. So Binance coin or a Celsius coin or Ven, any of these things potentially for a wide variety of digital assets may eventually run on the Libra network. So
I didn't know Stan was hired by Libra.
no, listen, I'm no fan. I mean, definitely. But I think that it's sort of an elephant in the room that we haven't talked about. And I think that the shadow of Libra is bigger than maybe most of us would like to admit in the room. Like, it is a game changer for the industry. And if it gets through, and I do think some form of it will get through, it's going to radically, it's going to radically change the landscape. And it's going to push all of us into some new version of whatever we're doing.
Let me expand a little bit because my answer was a little bit of a cop-out, and I hate doing that. It would depend on adoption. So I personally think that if it gets through Washington, there would be significant adoption. And if that's the case, there will be market makers and there will be a need for liquidity. And that is what Binance does. We're a liquidity provider right now. So almost by definition, we would be involved one way or another. And then as a subset of that, we do consider acting as node operators for currencies that are trying to become increasingly decentralized. So that is why I would say, yeah, we would consider operating a node.
And I'm sure they'd want to list with Binance for trading.
I would hope so, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ease off the gas a little bit here, and I'm going to ask you guys just a wrap-up question. No sign of GURPS yet, so I'm just going to keep going with this because I'm loving this conversation. So let's talk about your vision just for a minute. It's really an honor to have both of you on the stage. I think everyone in this world knows your companies very well. Many of us work with your companies, but the world is moving, and this industry is moving so fast. We don't really get a sense of vision from where the leaders are going until it actually is out. And of course, there are strategic reasons for that because you don't want to give away your strategies per se. But outside of strategy, like vision, do you have a long-term vision for Binance? Do you have a long-term vision for Celsius that involves something beyond paying people and around inclusion? Because I think Celsius could go in a lot of different ways. Binance has already shown that it's going a lot of new ways. What's your vision?
Look, I actually think we should be the retail app for crypto in the world, meaning that we can provide different services. We have a cell pay. We created actually a payment system in our app already. It's not something that we've had the actual bandwidth to promote as it should be yet. So it will be, but this is just one thing. This is we don't want to get rid of wallet addresses and make it easy. The other thing is we don't have the fiat rails yet. We're going to partner with the good companies that are we want to have the entire retail ecosystem within our app. I'm sure that's the goal of a lot of other dApps right now, but I do believe we have the traction and the drive and the wherewithal and the knowledge to build it, and the partners. We're not going after we're not becoming an exchange because there are people that do that very well. So what the future holds, I don't know, but what I think what we can, if people have, what are the apps that everyone has on their phone today, right? And including WeChat. And then we think Americans tend to think of the apps Americans use, and Line, and some of the other, and the phone company apps globally. That's one goal. The other goal is truly to make the banks sell all their real estate in New York. I'm not kidding. I mean, I think that will, when this monumental shift happens, I talk about it, people laugh, oh, Liz in the banks, you know. But when this happens, there will be, and I hope we survive this all, truthfully, there will be this monumental shift in financial services globally, which will be cross-border. They're gonna, people are, the borders cannot exist at that point the way they do today. I'm not saying there should be no borders. I have other, philosophies. But, it's going to change the way we conduct business, the way we educate our children, the way we provide health care, which was mentioned earlier, and address some of the other things like climate change, et cetera. So I have really big visions that Celsius will have a role in each of these applications in people's lives, not just in 3 years or 5 years, but in 25 years and 50 years.
Okay, amazing. That's a great vision. I mean, I can see that. It's scary, but I can see it.
Well, that's a great segue. We have a pretty clear vision and mission. The vision is clearly freedom of money, and I think a couple of things that Liz subscribed are a couple of steps that will happen at one point or another. Hopefully within my lifetime. But yeah, I mean, look, the world, the way we travel, do business, educate, can consume entertainment, content, et cetera, is very global. And the banking system, quite frankly, hasn't kept up. There's tons of frictions, there's tons of siloed systems. The transaction costs are high, and the user experience, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we feel like it kind of works, but when I travel and I can't get money out of a bank machine, which happens a lot, it's you see the weaknesses. And then finally, frankly, there's a financial illiteracy that's sort of built into the system so that we don't realize that our central banks printing cash make us poor every year. So ultimately, that is the vision, right? To disintermediate a lot of the frictions, let money flow as freely as possible. If it's your money and you earned it legitimately, you should be able to invest in any project globally. And the mission, therefore, as a corollary, is really to be the infrastructure provider in crypto. So at the moment, we're known as being an exchange, and we'll likely continue being that in the near future. But I think, and the reason for that is because we're still very early stage in the industry. So yes, Bitcoin is approaching its 11th year, and prior to 2017, there was global penetration of like 0.05% globally, right? And after 2017, you had an order of magnitude increase, but we're still an order of magnitude away from a tipping point. So until we reach that tipping point, the exchange business and providing liquidity will probably be the dominant piece of our business. But once there is early to mass adoption, you'll see spreads. You'll see those liquidity pools consolidating. You'll see spreads come down, and we should be finding something else to do. And so that's why we've been, exploring all these different areas. One of the biggest areas that you see in our announcements are fiat to crypto gateways, because we need to bring that money into the crypto world. 99.9% of money is still traditional fiat.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, how many people think trickle-down economics works? Not at all. No one. No one thinks it's, even if you vote that way, you don't think it works. It just works for you. So eventually, that's. I think that I hope that what we're building is going to eliminate some of that.
Well, in liquidity, we would say we're into flow-up economics. So let's try to build those pathways. Thank you so much for joining us. Binance and Celsius, two of the real icons in the industry. So glad to have you at Liquidity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.